Good morning, everyone. Lots of people braved the rain. It's good. So I've been giving a series of talks, and I'm very happy that this is my last talk for a little bit. So other people may be happy too. So this particular topic, I've been talking a little bit about the new map that I have been fortunate enough to have a little help discovering. Our good friend Caddy brought to our attention a few months ago a very important set of teachings called the Xiankuan, which can be translated as 5 approaches to meditation. I like the translation of 5 stabilization mind contemplations or insight practices. And I would like to continue my talk on this subject by talking about the first of the 5, which is called in Chinese Bujingguan, which means impurity insight. So I have some thoughts to share with you on this topic today. There's quite a bit here, so I'm just going to hit some of the points, and hopefully they will make some sense. I grew up in a scientific household, and my father was a biochemist, and when I was a very small child, he taught me the laws of thermodynamics. I think I was probably 2. He would say things, when I would throw a toy, he would say something like, "Matter can neither be created nor destroyed." If you grow up in such a household, you make a mess in your room, and the father says, "Clean up your entropy." The disorganization. Yes. Yes. When things get colder and colder, things slow down. Molecules do not bounce around as much. These are some of the laws of thermodynamics. So these 5 approaches to meditation, these stabilization practices, are very deep. And in our practice, when we do insight practice, it can be helpful to understand a little bit about what this is about. So the first one, called impurity, this is a little misleading, and also very, if you penetrate into it, you can see that there's great depth here. So there are 3 parts to understanding this impurity practice. The first is that everything is impermanent. And the second part is that everything is unsatisfactory. Now this, at first, might seem a little bit pessimistic. But in fact, if you look more deeply into particularly your feelings, you'll see that if you understand that things are unsatisfactory, you feel this unsatisfactoriness, maybe in a way there's kind of a collective humanity to this, Well, everybody is feeling this. So when something unsatisfactory happens, not so surprising, not so upsetting. So this impermanent and unsatisfactory sometimes are put together as one. In the Japanese Zen tradition, they do that. They say that all things are impermanent, and in that they also include the unsatisfactory nature of things. So when we contemplate the unsatisfactory nature of our experience, we don't just do it towards the outside world. We also recognize that this is true for us, for this physical body, for example. This physical body is impermanent and unsatisfactory. It doesn't work perfectly all the time. Then there is another aspect of this which has to do with purity and impurity. This is the third insight that we have into impurity. So I want to talk a little bit about this impurity. So the word that I translate about impurity in the we can see is to some degree related to the hindrance of sense-based desire. When people have strong cravings, they see they are drawn to certain things and they don't see the impurity in it. And then when they begin to see the impurity in it, then they become upset and distressed. This is called marriage. Oh, so desirable. We have the newlyweds here. I don't want to upset them. Yes. Marriage, oh, I love this person so much. Even before marriage, oh, yes. And then, not perfect. Unsatisfactory. So this craving, this, oh, I want this so much, when this becomes very strong, then we need to be able to practice an antidote. We need to be able to say, oh, okay. It's not totally pure. It's okay. In Pali, the word is ashubha. In Chinese, bujing. So I want to talk a little bit about these words and how it's connected. This is really for those people who are familiar with the Buddhist methodology. This is also deeply connected to the first of the 5 hindrances as well. The desire for sense-based pleasure that becomes very strong. So impurity, insight, Bujing Guan. Guan, I've mentioned this word before, but for those people who haven't know about the word Guan, let me restate that Guan is a picture of a wild bird, a heron. And if anyone has ever spent time on the river, they'll know that if they see a heron and they try to get close to it, the heron will screech and fly away. They're not easily approached. But this particular heron has learned how to calm his or her own nature so that it's able to penetrate into the sounds of suffering in the world. This is Guan Yin. We have the Guan Yin Pavilion, the same Guan. So this Guan also means to have insight into or to contemplate deeply, to be able to let go of this tendency, this nature, that we might consider that the bird has, overcoming that and being able to be still. So that's Guan, that's the insight. So Bu Jing Boom just means no, and Jing here means purity. So this purity is actually a very difficult word to find the etymology on this word. I had to break it down into different components. It's a hand, and on the other side there's water, and above an abbreviation for fire. So the water is heated up, so you're washing your hands in warm water. Purity. That's good. So this is an antidote to this greediness that the mind has. The greediness in the mind, raga, or sometimes kama, is related to the Chinese term tan or tan yu. Tan is a picture of mindfulness without the heart underneath. Mindfulness is a picture of looking out of a window, being in the here and now. With the heart underneath, that means the mind is and heart are in the here and now. But the mind and heart have been taken off and instead attached money. This is greediness. So the person's focus is only on gaining more. The Chinese character that's attached to this, Tan Yu, this is also the characters that are used in the first of the 5 hindrances, is a picture of a person who is swept down a narrow gorge of rushing water, a torrent, not able to breathe, being continued to be swept under. So the person is swept under by their own overwhelming greediness. So they can't practice the mind being clear. So this antidote of contemplating the unattractiveness or unsatisfactoriness of our human body in order to counter sexual desire particularly is undertaken by examining the body in all of the different parts, and you see all the different parts as being, if you take the skin off, the body isn't very attractive. If you look at the internal organs, not very attractive. We go to the bathroom, not attractive. We get older, not attractive. We get sick, not so attractive. The body dies, not so attractive. So this kind of contemplation. So it's something that can be practiced, but we have to be careful and not go too far. Because if you take it too far, then we go to an ascetic practice and it becomes too extreme. And there are cases that I'm not going to go into today where the monks took it too far. And this is something that actually the Buddha really wanted to counter in his teachings. He said, we don't want to be sense-based, desire-oriented, nor do we want to become ascetic. We want to be middle way. It's a middle way practice. So there are specific chapters where the Buddha discusses this and says if you go too far, you should practice more mindfulness of the breathing. Okay, Connected to this notion of impurity is this idea of impurity from the point of view of how we see things. It's not that the thing itself is either pure or not pure, it's how we see it. It's our viewpoint. So Ashubha, the impurity, is connected to how we see things. This is called alambana. This is a very important term, in particularly when we get into Yogacara. So for those people who are going to be interested to take the Yogacara retreat, they will learn more about alambana, but for today, not so much. Just mention the term, plant an alambana seed in your consciousness. So when we look at impurity and what it is that we're trying to have an antidote for, we're looking at particularly the mental factors of how we pay attention, what our habit energy is, and what our attention is. These together are very important. This is called in Pali Manaskara, Chitana, and Samkalpa. So these tendencies that the mind has toward what am I going to pay attention to? What is my habit energy? What is my intention? These are the important things to notice. So I see something out there that's very attractive to me. A whole beautiful pile of gold. So I look at my mental energy, my volitional formations, and I say, I've been taught all my life that gold is very valuable. I can do a lot with that gold. So now my tendency affects my intention. I want some of this gold. So this is where we have to be very careful. I like the metaphor that's given by Asanga, one of the Yogacara teachers, who says, for us, if we walk down the side of the road and we see a big pile of poop, we say, that's disgusting. But if you're a fly, you say, dinner. Yes. So it turns, I'm going to say a little bit about alambana. So in a text by the great teacher Nagarjuna is like the major figure that transformed the original teachings of Buddhism and updated them to what we call Mahayana. Both very valuable teachings. But Nagarjuna, very important teacher, wrote a very significant text. It's the text that the Dalai Lama travels with. He's always carrying this particular book, and he gives many talks on this particular text, either explicitly or sometimes without necessarily directly referring to it. This text is called the Mula Madhyamaka Karika, the fundamental wisdom of the middle way. It also contains in the Chinese the word guan, the same word guan for insight, zhongguan lun. So this means, if I'm not mistaken, middle contemplation commentary. Okay? So I'm going to give you the first verse of this book, because when I give you the first verse, you may want to run outside. Very difficult text to understand. It begins, neither from itself, nor from another, nor from both, nor without a cause, does anything whatever anywhere arise. Then you put the book down and you say, thank you very much, Mr. Nagarjuna. If you have a little bit more persistence and you read the second verse, he says there are 4 conditions, and he lists them, and then he says there's no 5th condition. And one of those conditions is called alambana. And when this teaching ends up in Yogacara about 3 or 4 centuries later, and a commentary is written by the great monk Xuankuan about this, he devotes 1 chapter to 3 of the conditions and 1 chapter just to alambana because of how important it is. This is how we look at things. This is what we have our control over. The other factors, not so easy. So alambana actually has 2 parts to it. One is how we see things that are close to us. That's like our family. And how we see what's distant from us. Things that are more neutral to us. Which, if you look at this in more detail from a psychological point of view, accounts for why many people are very nice to those who they don't know, but when they're intimate with someone, that's when their habit energy comes out and they tend to be more difficult. So this brings us to another verse from another text that again is part of the Mahayana tradition. And unlike the Diamond Sutra that emerged very early in Chinese Buddhism, this particular text was a little bit later. And the version that really became part of the Chinese practice of Buddhism of reciting this particular text, this discourse, was the translation that was done by, again, this great monk Xuankuan in the 7th century. The Diamond Sutra was already being practiced. This other set of verses came a little bit later. And these verses are called the Heart Sutra. And one of the verses in the Heart Sutra goes like this: all dharmas are empty in character, neither arising nor ceasing, neither impure nor pure, neither increasing nor decreasing. So here we see neither impure nor pure. This is the middle way between of the way of practicing understanding impurity by not going too far one way or too far the other way. Seeing this as just how it is that we view it. The thing itself is neither pure nor impure. It depends upon whether we're a human or a fly. It depends upon our perspective and our training. When our plumbing backs up in our house, oh, this seems very impure. For the plumber, he says, oh, I'm going to be able to take my family out for pizza tonight. I'll be able to put my children through college. It's just a matter of perspective. This is alambana. So, without going into too much detail about all of the other verses, neither arising nor ceasing, this is a very profound understanding that happens when a person attains prajnaparamita, the highest level of wisdom, seeing that everything in a way is empty. And this is difficult for people to have an understanding of, because constantly things are arising and ceasing for them. But if the mind becomes calm enough, then rising and ceasing becomes less of a concern. As the mind approaches closer and closer to a state of stillness, entropy slows down. Third law of thermodynamics. Thoughts and feelings begin to calm down more and more and more, so that there is not so much arising, not so much ceasing. We are aware of rising and ceasing, and then even that dissolves. Now, neither impure nor pure, this is very important. I already told you about how pure is a picture of someone washing their hands with warm water. The character for impure, this is gu? Go. Thank you. Go. Is a picture of a person who's giving orders, but he's doing it holding on to dirt. Impure. So it means dirty or stained or impure. So neither bugo, bujing, either impure nor pure. So we want to tune our mind to that awareness that things in and of themselves are not either pure nor impure. It's just our perception. Neither increasing nor decreasing, again, requires a lot of subtlety in the mind. This is the conceptual tendency of the mind to want to add on to stuff. So we have an experience and we want to add on to it. We want to build it up, or we want to take things away from it, decrease it. This increasing and decreasing is on one side, wanting to make something reified. This is real, and this doesn't exist at all. So those two extremes, we want to be careful about that. So we can see that the Heart Sutra is very profound in this area. When we do the Heart Sutra, we can see Shubhuti, all dharmas are empty in character. Guan Yin says this. Neither arising nor ceasing, neither impure nor pure, neither increasing or decreasing. These are the laws of thermodynamics. My father would be very happy. One little story that I've told before about my father. He was the most devout person I ever knew, devout atheist. When he had his heart surgery, replacing his aortic valve at age 80, he said to me, right before they wheeled him into surgery, he says, "Don't worry, if I don't make it, it's over." And I said to him, "When I was little, you taught me the laws of thermodynamics." And he looked at me rather surprisingly because we hadn't talked about it for so many years, 50 years, 45 years. And he looked at me rather surprised. He says, "Yes, what do you remember?" I said, "Matter can neither be created nor destroyed. So it is with consciousness." And he looked at me and he said, "That's the first important thing you've ever said." And he went through the surgery and he was fine. The only problem was that he didn't remember saying that about me. I should have had him write it down. This is not to say that consciousness itself does not also have its moment of entering into nirvana, and then maybe we don't have words to describe what happens at that point. But thank you for your kind attention today. As we enter into the holiday season, we remember all of those people who are not so fortunate to have independence and freedom. The people who have lost their lives in the last few weeks in Orlando and Turkey and Bangladesh and Iraq again this morning. We around the world, the different troubles that people have created. And we send our loving kindness to all of those people who are suffering, both the victims and the perpetrators, because they're suffering a great deal as well. May all beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May all beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May all beings be aware of the great gifts that all of us have, the preciousness that we all have within us. And may we dwell in the great equanimity which is free from attachment, aversion, and ignorance.